So our next panel, I'm pleased to say, and there's a certain logic to this, you have to admit, don't you? The need for a harmonised tertiary sector. So we're thrilled to have coming to the stage now, as I introduce them, Professor Barney Glover, Commissioner of Jobs and Skills Australia. Make your way to the stage if you would, Barney Glover AO. Jenny Dodd is here. Always great to see Jenny, CEO of TAFE Directors Australia. Felix Pirie, Chief Executive Officer of the Independent Tertiary Education Council Australia. And Janelle, Chief Industry and Education Officer of Bendigo Kangan Institute. Please make them all very welcome as they come to the stage and ensure their microphones are turned on. Hello to you. We've never met. Hi. Excellent point. All right. We could start almost anywhere, couldn't we? But let's start at the end and work our way back through to the beginning, Barney. Interesting comment from Liam Walsh there. You're going to be in the room where it happens, presuming that it does happen. The roundtable will happen, but when anything happens as a result, I suppose, is what we're all very much hoping for. Session 2 of day 1 of the Economic Roundtable is about skills and future skills, and you're there. There's 2 chancellors of universities, Jennifer Westacott, who's got a storied history at advocating for industry, and Martin Parkinson, who gave great service in the Treasury. So you're the guy who has to advance the skills argument in that moment, that day. What are you going to say to them?
Great first question, Ellen. Really appreciate it. I think that both Jennifer and Martin are equally going to be in alignment, if you like, about the importance of the skills conversation with the Economic Reform Roundtable. And I know Jennifer, as Chancellor at Western Sydney University, is very passionate about tertiary education in this country and was at the BCA. So I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of alignment here across all 3 of us in giving our presentation. It's a unique opportunity to be in that room for that period of time and have a chance to pick up on what I see as a lot of momentum building around how we can impact on productivity and economic reform and the prosperity of this nation. It was interesting to listen to the previous panel talking about, and your comment, that productivity is not just about the economic welfare of the nation, it's about people fundamentally and the change in their lives and their prosperity. I have 6 grandchildren, about to have a 7th. Ranging in age from 0 to 23. I have a pretty fair idea. I want those young people to have a great future. And we need to have a conversation in that room about the things that will critically influence that future. And of course, upskilling Australia is a crucial part of that. Tomorrow, Jobs and Skills Australia will release our Generative AI in the Australian Labour Market report. And I believe the Minister might have made reference to that this morning. Right. One of the things I'll be emphasising is the critical importance of AI and the agency we need to provide to Australians and to Australia to ensure that we get the greatest possible outcome from this economic transformation and that we future-proof the career and job opportunities for young people by exposing them to AI, as well as addressing all the challenges, regulatory, safety or otherwise, and the guardrails. But we need a national approach to AI. I will be emphasising AI skills in that room. I'll be emphasising the importance of upskilling Australians because we know 90% plus of the jobs of the future, irrespective of AI, are going to require post-secondary education. We have to get that right, and that's a big challenge. We need to uplift participation in the labour market from those who are perhaps less educationally advantaged and struggling and in equity. We can't hit any of our big aspirational targets for this country without an equity uplift, and that's where a joined-up tertiary education system is going to be vital. I'm going to channel Jenny, who's going to say, we've tried it, it's tough. I think the zeitgeist is with us on this one at the moment. I think there's a momentum building about a better connected tertiary system. I'm going to emphasise that because I'm going to say if we have barriers and challenges in our tertiary system, young people in particular, or older workers who are thinking they need to reskill, which they will need to reskill, if they experience a barrier trying to navigate their way through vet and higher ed, they'll drop out. So we've got to get the friction out. Credit transfer. We've got the Productivity Commission coming out this week with its discussion paper. And it does allude to many of the things that tertiary harmonisation will do and many other things.
That's the one on digital skills.
Digital skills,
Yeah.
credit transfer, recognition of prior learning. Let's better utilise the skills of
There's
migrants.
some low-hanging fruit in there you could probably do with a quick cabinet meeting and a few of the leftover muffins outside, couldn't you?
I'm more than happy to take those muffins along. I have a feeling it won't be as persuasive as Jennifer, Martin and myself making the argument and listening to the conversation in that room, because it's a vital moment for Australia.
Okay. Jenny, can I turn to you on this question of tertiary harmonisation? You know, late last century, which was to say just the other day, when we would talk about tertiary harmonisation, it was really just about universities trying to grab a bit of what you do, right? Now we've started to imagine a pathway that smudges what's secondary education, what's tertiary education, when can those things begin and end, and what's vocational and what's in the realm of universities. But what does harmonisation mean now? What does harmonisation mean today, particularly as you've got AI coming along that will revolutionise not only how we work, but how we think and learn? Like, what does it mean?
I think the fact we're just talking about it has a lot of benefit to it. So I want to give a couple of examples, and one I'm going to give the accolades to Barney on. This is not a Barney Jenny show, but and in that that is yesterday. I had 8 TAFEs at 5 o'clock sitting around having a conversation around what has come through the university's Accord piece of work, which is around Commonwealth supported places for TAFE. And how were they going to work together in a collaborative way to think about the benefits of Commonwealth supported places through to university in the higher education degrees that they offer within TAFEs. And this is the really poignant point. This is all about a group of students who by and large have been equity students who have chosen TAFE as a pathway for higher education and have often, most predominantly, come through a vocational pathway first and then want to stay in TAFE. Now, we were working together as a collaboration to work out a small number of Commonwealth supported places in place for 2026 that Barney and his colleagues in the Accord panel were instrumental in saying we need diversity of providers if we're going to upskill the Australian population and no one gets left behind. That's a really practical example of how we keep that focus on equity students, how we enable equity students to not only maximise their vocational qualification, but to be able to move, if that's what they wish to do, with financial support from the Commonwealth to be able to go on to the next level of qualification. This is one piece of a puzzle on tertiary harmonisation. The second point I'm going to make, Ellen, is around we need to get rid of some of the shackles of the system. And I don't think that is hard, and Barney referred to the fact that I say it is quite hard, but I think we're seeing evidence where it's happening. If we look at the investment that states and territory governments with the Commonwealth in vocational education and training have made in TAFE centres of excellence, and we now have about 11 of them, those TAFE centres of excellence are driving innovation, are driving partnerships with industry, and are driving very much close working together with universities to be able to do things differently. They're doing them in different ways. They're all doing them with a very strong focus on what does industry need us to do, what's the student outcome of that, how are we going to do something differently. If this constraint of the system isn't going to fit our model, well, we're going to challenge the constraint of the system. That's another place where we've got some really good investments starting to occur in practical harmonisation. And the last example I want to give was a group that was formed about 10 years ago, and it's directly relevant to the people in this room. TAFEs came together when cyber was becoming a huge thing. The TAFEs around the country, who are all owned and operated by state governments predominantly, came together and said we would work better together to address these issues of cyber. And we have a very viable and strong cyber network that has actually invested themselves in driving some skills development to address at the time, and still is, what were some of the major skill sets that were needed in these sort of industries. those sorts of examples of collaboration also have taken into other partners in the process of building that cyber network, both in secondary schools and in higher education. So I think it's happening. And I think the way to look at harmonisation is to look at it through the practical examples that exist, because it's those practical examples that are going to give evidence of how it is actually occurring. And just because I've got the microphone, I want to acknowledge 2 TDA corporate affiliates who are in the room today. Thank you to MYOB and to ReadyTech, who've been corporate affiliates of TDA as a small business. We operate as the peak body for TAFE. We do appreciate your ongoing support. Thank you.
Wow, well done. Maybe, Janelle, you want to pick up on that before I go to Felix, in terms of how you're meeting the challenges posed by the competency-based environment and what that harmonisation has meant for how you operate and how you see what you're delivering to students.
Well, I'd say it's early days for harmonisation. So in terms of a net result of how it's influencing what we do in terms of on-the-ground action, I'd say that's still yet to unfold. And I know we've heard a lot today about the need for reform, that training packages aren't working. And I would say through the priorities of harmonisation, training reform and funding reform are the 2 key priorities that are almost the prerequisite for us to be able to move forward around how we actually deliver harmonisation for the sector. I think what we're doing in terms of action with making the best of what we have in the system at the moment and looking to the future is really about how do we innovate collectively, how do we come up with new ways of trying to experiment and create insights that can help inform and mature that model. And we know it comes from the need to think about building on what has been education provider and industry-led to try and start to steer it towards education provider, government, industry and learner to have a really joined-up effort around what are the key things that actually are going to provide the best possible outcomes for industry and for learners, because we know we're not going to be able to get all of our critical skills needs filled with early school leavers.
Yes.
So it means things like career change will absolutely be critical to the success of our economy into the future. So we will need to be able to have more earn and learn offerings, which is one of the key things that we've been trying to build within the current system to offer, but it will need work on the levers that are going to be able to enable that to be an attractive proposition for a mature age worker who still needs to support their family to be able to actually make that step and go into a new career. The other thing that we've been doing is really trying to collaborate with government, with our network colleagues and also with industry on how we can co-design and experiment in new spaces. So we've just recently completed and had approved the Ask Yourself accreditation pilot where we developed the Advanced Diploma of Digital Innovation. And that was, a really exciting and interesting experiment and co-designed and informed by industry as well as learners and in partnership with our regulator. It's one step. You've then got to deliver it and evaluate it and take what the learnings are from it. But literally anything that we can try and do in that space we are doing. We are working with our state regulator to be able to bring speed to market around new qualifications. We are experimenting and developing micro-credentials. We're doing a whole lot of stuff, but what I would say is that it's largely self-investment. So we are obviously getting some support from our state government to help us with certain projects, but for things like even the Ask Yourself accreditation pilot, they are self-investment.
And by that you mean you're taking the initiative, the system isn't pushing you to do it, you're just actually good at what you do.
And we're reinvesting in ourselves to create that product. So really, we need a tighter cadence of innovation to build more insights and more learning. And the way that we could best be placed to do that would be to have a joined up effort of government, of industry, of unions to try and create innovation funding that would enable us to be able to work collectively to iterate in a faster cadence, build more insights, evaluate and build more product that will actually support a range of different diverse learners with different needs that are going to have different behaviours and different expectations to be able to operate in the future world of work.
Wow, how about that for a call to action? Felix, can I turn to you? You occupy this very interesting space at the Independent Tertiary Education Council Australia, in that you're trying to be the joined-up person, I guess, between the needs of students and employers and independent education providers. I'm interested in having you think about the importance of harmonisation to your members and why.
Thanks very much, Ellen. The first thing I'd like to do is just to, I guess, pay tribute to and to thank my fellow peak body leaders here, Jenny, on the one hand. Despite what a lot of people think, Jenny and I don't really disagree on a lot. Funding's an obvious one. Shouldn't fund TAFE. But we don't really disagree on a lot. And also Russ Hawkins from Community Education Australia, who's here in the room today. Community education providers do some really terrific things in Australia, and they support a lot of really disadvantaged Australians, and they're a really key component of this harmonisation project. The other thing I wanted to mention is to you, Ellen. This is a bit of a milestone moment for me. It was about a decade ago or so, was the last time I was at an event that you were at. You facilitated an event, in fact Jenny was probably there, much bigger than this, and this is why your journalism degree was so important, because you managed to do so on the floor, walking around without shoes on. As a true expert, and that's why journalism...
See, my professionalism has developed.
Yeah,
I'm not wearing proper shoes, but at least they're on.
And that would have been a short course, I'd imagine. But one of the things that's important to us, and this is probably a bit nitpicky. People who know me know that that's very unlike me, but Craig, not funny. But one of the... We prefer probably not to talk about it in a context of harmonisation. We're actually looking at it in the context of a complementarity between the two systems, between skills training and higher education. One of the reasons for that is that skills training and higher education really need to maintain their distinctiveness. Okay, they're quite different systems, and they should maintain their distinctiveness as different systems. And Jenny really highlighted one of the big issues there, and that is about investment. One of the things we push quite a bit is that, and this was referred to earlier today, and I think it was referred to in a really concise and good way, is that we don't fund the recipient. We don't fund students in Australia appropriately. We've, for a really, really long time, have been funding institutions. We fund the university, we fund the TAFE, we fund the provider through states. We don't fund students. And Melinda talked a little bit about that as, frankly, a really unproductive way to get the outcomes we need through our system. That requires a huge change in the way that we think about the outcomes that we need. So that's a really big issue for us. In terms of harmonisation, what that means is that what we're looking for, if you think about it in the context of complementarity, if you're funding a student, if you're saying to a student, now I'm not going to use the V word, I'm not going to talk about vouchers or anything like that, but the mechanism that we choose to design and to use, if we're looking at investing in students and students' links to employers and saying to students, look, here's your amount of money, here's the investment that we provide to you. How you choose to use that, it's a matter for you. If you want to go and study with TAFE and to do one of the courses that Jenny was just talking about through cyber or whichever it might be, great, we'll back you, we'll support you. If you want to go and do a similar course or a different course with an independent provider, we'll back you, we'll support you. But at the moment, we don't do that. And one of the reasons from our point of view is because Australia loves nothing more than to over-regulate. We have never seen anything that we don't want to regulate. And one of the ways we talk about it, both in the office and certainly my wife loves this one, is that we love to overboil the egg. Okay, and that's a huge problem for us when it comes to thinking about harmonisation or however we like to term it.
Barney, thinking more broadly then, we're talking about harmonisation, but what is the distinction between a university pathway and a vocational education pathway? What advice would you give the Treasurer about that? What advice would you give your grandchildren about that? How does it fit together?
There's a very, very important conversation to have, and I'm hoping they have it at the Economic Reform Roundtable, because if we just focus on the tertiary end of the education spectrum and productivity, we may be talking about nearer term and significant changes that might influence Australia's productivity, absolutely, AI being one of them. But we've got to reach deeper into some of the challenges in our school system as well. And you talk about what advice would we give to young people. There's a couple of very, I think, really challenging reports out at the moment. One's an OECD report on the career aspirations of 15-year-olds across the OECD, 750,000 15-year-olds. Wow. And they were asked yet again about their career aspirations, as have been done for many years. And you look at the top 10 career aspirations of young boys and girls at age 15, they haven't changed in 30 years. What's worse is they've actually the set is contracted, and a lot of the jobs of the future don't appear. If you ask them about careers advice, they say, yeah, I can sort of remember getting some careers advice. They're only 15-year-olds. But they really don't have a sense of what that future might look like. And a lot of the great opportunities in the economy in the future, AI-infused as it will be, are actually in areas they don't yet realise and that they're not aware of. And we're not giving them enough information to help guide them in their decision-making. We've also developed, we've been incredibly successful in this country over the last 15 years in particular, in ensuring that we have uplifted the tertiary qualifications of the population. A lot of data to show that. But we have an imbalance in our post-secondary education profile. And this is why harmonisation is important. We need to uplift the VET qualified young people moving into the workforce as much as we need to continue to grow our university system. So there's a great deal of reaching in to our schools and providing them with the information they need, and seeing across Australia VET in schools programs, schools in VET programs involving our great TAFEs like Bendigo, Kangan and others, more actively involved in uplifting the aspiration of young people. We've seen a drop away in recent years in the number of young people finishing Year 12. That's a worry. We just announced our regional roadmap recently, and one of the pieces of data that caused maximum concern is the number of 15 to 20-year-olds that are no longer in work or study. And it's now 1 in 6 in regional Australia, 15%. These are challenging pieces of data, 1 in 10 in our urban regions, 1 in 6 in our regional regions. Not to mention the number of young people now emerging who think that their future career is a social media influencer.
Yes.
We have got to do a lot more.
So not, isn't it?
It's so not. I mean, some maybe, but no, it's not what I think we want to encourage them to do. There's a productive end to our economy. We need to uplift participation in apprenticeships, in the trades, through our great private vet providers as well. My concern at the moment is that this is not just a let's see what we can do to harmonise tertiary education. Let's harmonise our education system, make sure young people are as informed as we can make them, get the best infrastructure in our school system to give them a taster of what the future might hold for them, and let's get business to lean in so we do have the work integrated learning and the placements and the way we can help young people to understand what great career opportunities there are. That will drive productivity.
Janelle, when you're talking about you need some levers to make this happen, to what extent, where's the role of industry in that sort of, you can see what you can do, you just need some people to get out of the way. Who do you want to partner with you to get there? What's the role of industry in terms of creating that aspiration for the sort of quals and credentials you can provide?
I think it's partnering deeply to really co-design on new products and learning.
But I would have thought that that's what TAFE's always done.
It is, but I think you've got to sort of step back and stop thinking about the current construct of how qualifications are done. So under the current training package, it is very prescriptive. With the work that we need to do around training reform, it's actually about how we stop incrementally having these prescriptive elements and performance criteria of skills and actually broaden it out. We've got areas that are moving at such a rapid pace, digital and business for a key example. It's fitting we're here talking about this here today. It's iterating at such a cadence. Like, you cannot possibly have these prescriptive rules that you're going to deliver. We heard earlier from talking about CommBank and what they're doing in terms of technology. They're operating at a blazing pace. So there's no way working under the current conditions in terms of doing all of that, we're going to be able to build product in a co-designed way, because we're still focused on narrow skills, specialist skills. In many ways, for vocational education, the key piece is actually broadening back out. So it's some specialist skills. What do you actually need to have enough to be useful in your organisation for day one, right? But you're not going to spend 12 months getting reskilled, which is what we've heard from industry when they're taking 4-year graduates.
So they're unrealistic, you think?
Well, I think, look, there's definitely a skills mismatch component, but I think it's to the conversation on the previous panel, talking about the need to have greater transferability in skilling and in how you develop courses, having industry being part of that process under a new construct of training would actually give us far better outcomes and would help support alleviating what we're seeing in terms of skills mismatch with employers. So it's sort of two-part. The other bit, as I mentioned earlier, is also about how we need to come together and innovate and really fund innovation. And I think for large employers and for unions, there's definitely a role to play for us to be able to have that investment so that we can actually create new and be able to help inform how we actually really dial this to make it a leading skills system. I think at the moment, if we go down the current trajectory, we will continue to fall behind. And we are staring into the abyss of relevancy, right? So we really actually do have a burning platform around this stuff.
Who is? Who is? Australia?
Australia, the education sector and industry. Like if we actually don't come together and solve these problems together, productivity, as we know, is a significant conversation piece at the moment. It will continue to be at risk because we're not going to solve it unless we come together and solve it. And relevancy of education, frankly, like if we actually, vocational skills have a practical component that will always be important, but actually the whole ecosystem of learning and the way people learn, we actually need to change what we do. We need to think about how we augment our product. We need to think about how we augment our workforce, and that requires a lot of effort.
Felix?
Yeah, thanks very much. I completely agree. And one of the things I was going to mention before about, I was talking about complementarity, but one of the big issues for us is about actual harmonisation in a regulatory context. So independent providers have about 2/3 of all dual sector providers in Australia. And if you're a dual sector provider, independent dual sector provider, and you've got skills training students, higher education students, you might have international students, and you might operate in more than one jurisdiction, and you might have a government funding contract in more than one jurisdiction. You want those providers to meet a fit and proper person test, right? That's pretty obvious. But you'll have to meet a fit and proper person test as a higher education provider to have access to student loans, as an international education provider, as a skills training provider, and also for all and any state government funding contracts. And if you have access to vet student loans, you have to do another one. They're all separate. Surely we can harmonise those kinds of arrangements. Talking about low-hanging fruit, that should be pretty easy with a muffin, you'd think. But these have been around for over a decade, and we still haven't gotten there. So there are dozens of things like that we should be able to achieve, but we haven't been able to. And on the point about the complementarity across the two systems, it's really, really relevant in the training package areas that the FSO covers, because so many learners, so many graduates move seamlessly between the two systems, between higher education and skills. But we're not facilitating it, and we haven't gotten to the point yet. So one of the things that a number of our members see is they see students who graduated from a higher education provider in, say, accounting, but then they move back from accounting, they've worked in the workplace for maybe 6 months to 12 months, and then they go and pick up a couple of skill sets. But it's not seamless. It's a whole other process that they have to go through. These are some of the things that we need to make so much more student-centred, student-focused and business-focused.
Okay. Barney?
Yeah, look, just to respond, there's been some great themes running here, and one of the challenges around tertiary harmonisation at times, Ellen, is it can sound complicated to people. But if you pick them up, we talked about self-accrediting status in a pilot for TAFE. We've talked about Commonwealth-supported places into TAFE. We've talked about dual sector harmonisation, and I do pay credit to the work that ASQA and TEXA are doing to address dual sector harmonisation. This is not a blank sheet of paper. These are great examples alongside credit transfer and RPL.
Yeah.
And I'm calling out the JSCs in the room. They do an extraordinary job. And we had a tertiary education roundtable with Ministers Clare, Giles and Rishworth on Friday last week. It was a great session, and one of the phrases that stands out in my mind is, let's supercharge the JSCs. I know that Nat's here as well as PK. Let's make sure they are the great piece of architecture that we have in the tertiary system and enhance that architecture. And if I'm to call out one of the challenges here in trying to achieve all of these great outcomes, we've got to get universities into this space a little more enthusiastically and fully. The new Australian Tertiary Education Commission can play a role. It's called the Tertiary Education Commission for a reason, and that is to directly address tertiary harmonisation, and that means engaging with our 39 autonomous universities and bring them together as part of a system to appreciate the importance of their connection with TAFE Centres of Excellence, their connection with JSCs.
But what's in it for them to do that?
Well, relevance and sustainability would have been two that occur to me. I think at the moment, and let's pick up another great example of harmonisation, micro-credentials, micro-skills. You look at the Institute for Applied Technology Digital in Sydney, a great example of where we've got UTS, Macquarie, two great universities working with TAFE New South Wales, Microsoft, Salesforce, big tech companies, and they're delivering micro-skills on scale for people wanting to upskill. FSO working passionately in this space. Universities have to get with the zeitgeist. So there's a certain amount of, yes, we need a very powerful higher education system. We need their great innovation and research capability, but they need to work closely in the system and to see the benefits for students finding a pathway through, from vet to higher ed to vet. There's a lot of higher ed to vet articulation. Someone comes out of a degree and says, I need some practical skills to be employable. Let's embed more in some vocational degrees. There are really exciting models. There is a zeitgeist here, right? And what we need to say to the Economic Reform Roundtable is get with it and get on with it.
Jenny, your thoughts on that? There's another question here for you, but I just want to see what you think to that.
3 words. One is outcomes. Industry need to be, and jobs and skills councils need to be looking at outcomes, not have the prescriptive pathway that makes it nearly impossible for people to complete. So that's one. 2 is around flexibility. We have to look at a more flexible system that is not just one system, that allows for different innovation.
So what are so to Janelle's point, what are the levers you need for that? Because I have heard you and Barney say this for some years now, right?
Yep.
I've heard this a lot. I'm old. I was not grey when you started saying this.
That's true, Ellen.
So what's going to change to make this happen? Because the need's there, the imperative has been there for some time, right?
I think it is absolutely imperative in that JSC environment that they actually do look at outcomes. It's absolutely imperative that we get rid of what is a very prescriptive pathway on some of these qualifications. And if those outcomes then, which is how they were originally designed, those outcomes and those standards are delivered for industry, then I think you have a trust that must come in for providers to be able to deliver to the outcome. And it's some of those shackles. And the third point I want to make, and I think this is a big issue for Australia, and it's beyond, to some extent, the conversation in this room, it's around aspiration for our students who want to acquire these skills. How are we going to encourage our young people, and I think more mature people are more likely to, but how are we going to drive aspiration?
Yes.
And I think this is a really big conversation that is a separate conversation that we need.
Can I add just to this? We shouldn't think for a moment that a lot of progress isn't being made.
Sure,
it is
sure,
being
sure.
made, right? So we have, under the Albanese government last term and this term, we've created the Jobs and Skills Councils. We have Jobs and Skills Australia. We've had a CORD review. The recommendations are in place. Many of them already acted on. We have a lot of pilots as we test the policy frame. I think this Economic Reform Roundtable comes at exactly the right time for Australia. JSA will drop our AI in the labour market report tomorrow. That will feed into it. We've had the Productivity Commission coming into it. We've had this opportunity to see the architecture put in place. There's a lot of investment, supercharging. But the momentum, I think we need to build on. But this is not a blank sheet of paper. We're making progress.
Yes. There's a really good question here in terms of the overall point, which is why I think everybody gets up to do the work that you all do, which is it changes and improves lives, right? That's what it's about. That's what work does for people. So thinking about removing barriers, there's a question here from Kira Clark, Brotherhood of St Lawrence. Where in the harmonisation efforts can stronger alignment between the tertiary sector with other human services systems like the NDIS Workforce Australia be considered? Improved alignment is critical to expanding workforce participation in priority populations. Great question. Do you want to have a crack at that, Janelle?
I think there's a big opportunity to think about architecting the system. And hi, Kira. Certainly, we partnered with the Brotherhood over time and done a lot of work together, including the youth foyer that we have at our Broadmeadows campus. The work around all of those various services, there is, within their own right, significant duplication of effort and multiple buckets that all of the sector are trying to tap into to be able to provide what are critical wraparound supports to ensure success for people in life and in study. Equally, we have similar challenges as educators, and what we have tried to do where we can is bring them into the fold, so co-location or partnerships with community services to be able to have them to work together with us in providing wraparounds and where we can all collectively achieve key objectives that we all need to work on holistically. But there are mechanisms within funding contracts and the like that are problematic and duplicate effort or make it too difficult to collaborate in some of those spaces. So I think there's the how do you step back and architect and look at the whole? Where might you be able to have logical pieces to think about that actually make best sense to wrap around from an education and work ecosystem? That requires quite a significant undertaking. It's thinking well beyond the work of tertiary harmonisation and thinking about it as social cohesion, really.
Yes.
So I think but it is low-hanging fruit. It is fantastic opportunity, and it's something that I think us in the education sector have been thinking about for a long time.
And it does happen in an ad hoc way. It happens well in an ad hoc way. When you see it working, you say, there we are, more of that. And maybe that's how it does happen. Right? Maybe that's how it does happen.
But I think it's an area we can do better, and I'm glad the questions come up. It comes back to that comment earlier about if we're to meet our aspirational targets for this country, we have to uplift people from equity groups to participate in tertiary education much more significantly than they are now. We need to know what the barriers are to address them. Jobs and Skills Australia will be prioritising a research program around people with disability in our next program of work. We're looking forward to that, building on the National Disability Data Asset. So let's use the big capability of the Commonwealth and linked data assets to really understand what the barriers are and to make recommendations to government to address it. So I think very much our work across both tertiary harmonisation and people with disability, I think we're going to be able to make some contribution. I'm looking forward to it.
Just before we break for lunch, I'm interested in something that keeps occurring to me, and it perhaps came out of what Brendan was saying about the Commonwealth Bank, and something that Jenny was saying as well, is we need to inspire a hunger in people for learning, don't we?
We do. More so than ever in lots of ways. This is the comment that Liam O'Brien on the last panel.
Right.
And your comment about, why are we having this conversation about productivity? There's a really important set of skills that we need to emphasise more because AI will do a lot of technical things for us. But we need to be able to learn how to learn. We need how to supervise these new technologies. We need to have the cognitive skills to be able to actually flourish in the labour market. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to problem solve. We need these higher order skills, and we need our education system to provide that. And we need to engender in young people that passion for those skills because there's got to be a great life opportunity ahead of them.
And do you see that in people coming into the vocational education sector? Question to Felix and Jenny. That sense of not what the quals I've got that are on the CV I wrote out, but that sense of what's next and what's next and what's next and what's next. Are you seeing that in people, in students?
To an extent, I think that that has always been part of the adaptability of vocational education, to be able to do a shorter course, a longer course. I'm a great advocate, like Liam, on a first qualification. I would challenge most people in this room to actually say they didn't hold a qualification, and that's given you the currency and the career aspiration that has actually led to certain outcomes. And I think vocational education and the TAFE sector has been very good at both place-based learning, intergenerational support, making people feel safe in terms of where and how they can learn in safe environments, and gaining some of those skill sets and new knowledge that's critical. But I think there is a bit of a chasm growing, in that we're not seeing the aspiration there, if we look at our higher education sector, for higher education learning. And we've got to ask ourselves that question: why is it that students don't necessarily want to be purchasing what's on offer there? And is it, my first degree and my first career was in marketing, is the product wrong? Do we have to get the product right to actually appeal to the customer that we're trying to appeal to? So I think there's lots of conversations, but I do think in vocational education and in TAFE, we're able to adapt many of those products to meet those varying students. We just need to be able to make sure that they're outcomes-based, not overly prescriptive about how you get that outcome. And that's a big question for some of the completions conversation, because we believe that's still
And it's so relevant in Janelle, the industries that we're talking about here today, in finance and tech and IT, because that hunger is going to be critical in a rapidly changing environment with AI, isn't it? To be able to embed in people a sense of, quick, what's next? What's next? What's on offer? What can I grab? What do I need? What's next?
Yeah, agreed. And I think we're seeing it. I think we're seeing it in examples like Brennan, where they're employing teams that are all very much A-type employees, right?
Yes.
Like, absolutely. And we're also seeing it where we're seeing younger learners, Gen Zs coming through, that are starting to rethink about learning, to think about lifelong learning, and where organisations are investing heavily to create enriching learning development and skilling solutions within their own organisations or in partnership with education providers.
But I'm thinking back to Barney's list on the OECD of presumably astronaut, dentist. You know.
Actually,
100%.
It's sport that comes number one on this.
Yeah, I want to play sport, or I want to commentate on
I
sport.
want to be a sports star.
Yeah.
Well, but also I think we did a huge disservice when we organised the AQF into a ladder, right? So when it got structured as a ladder, it told us that you go from here up to here, as opposed to you traverse, you go up, down. It's like learning is not linear, right?
Yeah.
And so there's the opportunity through this work to rewrite the narrative, and that's critically important.
Absolutely, I agree. I think the AQF reform, training package reform, critical part of harmonisation. The other thing I'd mention is another very, very interesting OECD report a couple of weeks ago. You can run it through AI and get a very quick summary of it, by the way. It's about 300 pages. It was the Skills First report. What's that all about? That's this growing characteristic of recruitment around the world now, which we're seeing that, recruiters, companies are not looking for credentials as a proxy for capability and skills. They're just looking for skills. So we're seeing a decline in job advertisements requiring credentials and qualifications, and a massive increase in requiring skills. This is another challenge for the universities and for our tertiary system.
Why am I paying $100,000 for this if that's not what anyone's going to ask me in 10 years' time?
Are there other ways to get...
While I'm still paying off the debt.
Yeah, and what's a way to get a consistent, robust, verifiable skill I need to impress and how can I keep picking those skills up in a lifelong learning context?
Yeah.
And that's the future.
Final comments, Felix?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. I mean, we're seeing exactly the sorts of things that Jenny was describing. Most of our members that I speak to are talking about the way in which their existing learners and people who come back to them, so they get a lot of return students, they're looking at building things over time, their learning and their skills over time. But very, very similar, to my eternal shame, when my sister was at university doing philosophy, I used to tease her that she wasn't really that interested in employment as an outcome. She's now absolutely killing it, working overseas. She works in misinformation and disinformation, and so she, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
And
she
can
does. I'm pretty sure she does to me.
Yeah. And she can provide the philosophical difference between the two.
Yeah, but she
Yeah. If you're ever stuck
basically
in a
she
lift.
learned.
Yeah.
I am. I'm
Yeah.
all at sea with her. But she
learned to
learned
think.
these critical thinking
Yeah.
skills and the ability then to pick up short programs of information and skill really, really quickly. And in her field, in global misinformation, disinformation, in war zones and things like that, where she works, it's an essential part of what she does. So I think over a couple of decades now, and Liam alluded to this, we've really diminished the value of critical thinking skills, arts degrees, things like that, and how they are compatible with and interoperable with the skills training system, and that's been a mistake of ours.
Yeah, very good. Please thank the members of this panel very much. They've done some heavy lifting in the thinking stakes. What am I to tell you now? Something about food, I think. We'll break for lunch. You can connect with one another. That's good. Explore new ideas and recharge. You could eat as well. And we'll resume at 1:15 and we'll have the launch of that FSO Skills Accelerator AI, which is an exciting part of what we're doing today. Thank you.